We really do appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, today's media briefing is going to be discussing the response highlights from the Refugio response. I'm Chief Petty Officer Kip Wadlow with the U.S. Coast Guard. I will be moderating today. We will be presenting an update on the status of the response operations. With us today speaking will be Captain Jennifer Williams with the U.S. Coast Guard, Brett Moxley with the Environmental Protection Agency, Mark Crossland with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Tyson Tu with the California Department of Parks and Recreation, Ryan Rockebrand with the Santa Barbara Office of Emergency Management, and Patrick Hodgins with Plains All-American Pipeline. So today's press briefing will run on the following schedule. We are going to start with statements from the Unified Command members. Once their statements are done, we will have a question and answer period for approximately 30 minutes afterwards. So please, if you have any questions, let's let our speakers get through their presentations before we ask them. Their time is very limited, so for the question and answer period, I would like to have just start right to left and just have the reporter ask a question. You'll be allowed one follow-up, and then we'll move on to the next reporter, and we'll go in turns as such. Does anybody have it?
It'd be helpful for us if each speaker identified themselves, official title, and spelled their name.
Okay.
Before they start.
Okay, we can do that. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Captain Williams, the Coast Guard Federal On-Scene Coordinator, to start our press conference. Captain.
Good morning. I am Captain Jennifer Williams, JENNIFERWILLIAMS, common spelling. I'm the Federal On-Scene Coordinator for the Refugio oil spill. I'll be providing you with an update on our response. The Unified Command was established to respond to this incident, to clean up the pollution related to the pipeline release, and mitigate damage to the environment. State and federal regulatory agencies are conducting a separate investigation into the cause of the spill, and our focus within the Unified Command remains focused on the response and mitigation of the pollution incident. I'd like to call your attention to the storyboard to my right. Thank you. In particular, the green section there where it's labeled the first 24 hours. I would actually submit that most of the key items that were conducted in the first 24 hours were actually conducted in the first 12 hours. For example, within the first few hours, we had vacuum trucks at the release site sucking up crude oil. There were vessels on the water and a helicopter overhead directing the skimming operations. And furthermore, we deployed boom in areas to ensure no oil would go into environmentally sensitive sites as pre-planned by our area contingency plan. Furthermore, the Oil and Wildlife Care Network and the volunteer hotline were activated that same night. All of this was done within the first 12 hours. In the remaining 12 hours of the first 24 hours, we got more workers on the beach, more vessels on the water, and we were in process of mobilizing more teams that would cascade over the next few days to the site. As you can see from this storyboard, there was a lot occurring early on, and I assure you this doesn't depict everything, it's just a sampling of the key milestones during the event. We are now on day 37 of the incident. We have made significant progress since the beginning. At the height of the spill, you may recall that we had over 1,400 people involved in this response to this event. We had 18 vessels involved in the response on the water. We had excavators removing contaminated soil from the site of the pipeline release down to the bluff. We had a lane closed on the highway to allow for heavy equipment to conduct operations next to Highway 101. We had over 10,000 feet of various types of boom on the water and also staged to protect environmentally sensitive sites on shore. Today, Many of those operations are complete or nearly complete, but we still have 688 response personnel on the beach, still cleaning up oil. There are an additional 247 personnel behind the scenes who provide field support at our command post, field support in the field for planning and management. As of yesterday, response personnel have achieved 93% of our cleanup goals, and we're close to completing the final cleanup requirements needed to reopen the El Capitan State Park this Friday. While being 93% complete is a significant milestone for this response, we still have a lot of work to do. As is often the case, the last 10%, or in this case, the last 7%, will be the most tedious. At Refugio State Park, where most of the free oil impacted the shoreline, we faced several unique challenges for our cleanup teams, including limited time windows for conducting cleanup of the affected area due to tidal cycles and fluctuations, and the spill's proximity to unstable cliff face, which poses a safety risk to our crews. Despite these challenges, we continue to make progress, and our focus will continue to focus on the final 8.3 miles of coastline that has not met the cleanup objectives yet. This area includes the sandstone cliff where the oil initially entered the coast, which we expect will be the most challenging part of our cleanup. As we continue to meet our cleanup goals, you should anticipate seeing fewer contractors on the beaches wearing their white Tyvek suits and safety gear. This is normal progression for a spill cleanup. I want to assure you that until the job is complete, you will continue to see cleanup crews and shoreline cleanup assessment teams continuing to perform their necessary work. But perhaps the workers will be in smaller numbers, concentrating in a smaller area. As a result of this spill, I believe that the community is more aware and more willing to report pollution. Public awareness and involvement is desired. If anyone notices oil or hazardous materials polluting the environment, they should report it. But because this area is prone to tar balls and oil washing ashore due to natural seeps, I expect that we will have an increase in reporting, but that's okay. Reports of pollution can be made directly to the National Pollution Center at, I'll give you a phone number, 1-800-424-8802, or they can email the National Response Center at nrc@uscg.mil. Another very simple option for reporting is to make the report directly to a response agency such as the U.S. Coast Guard, California Fish and Wildlife, or their local first responders like the fire department. All of these agencies will take the reports, make the required notification to the National Response Center, and assess and respond as appropriate to the report of pollution. Finally, I want to thank the residents of Santa Barbara County for their patience and support during this time. The Coast Guard remains committed to working with our federal, state, and local partners and the responsible party to mitigate the effect of this spill to the environment. Thank you for coming out. I'd now like to introduce you to my federal counterpart, Mr. Brett Moxley, the on-scene coordinator for the Environmental Protection Agency.
Thank you and good morning. My name's Brett, B-R-E-T, Moxley, M-O-X-L-E-Y. I'm a federal on-scene coordinator with the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The U.S. EPA has been here largely in an assisting role to the principal federal on-scene coordinator, the U.S. Coast Guard. Our work has been predominantly removing oil and contaminated soil in the upland between the release site at the pipeline and the bluff where the cliffs contact the ocean. So far, we have removed 5,600 cubic yards of contaminated soil, which is roughly equivalent to 375 dump trucks. The area of principal excavation has been between the railroad and the bluff over the ocean. That's an excavation site that's now about 300 feet long, between 15 and 35 feet wide and 6 to 8 feet deep. At the deepest, we've contacted bedrock, After that excavation was complete, we've gone back and taken confirmation samples, drawn lines perpendicular to the axis of the excavation, taken samples on the two walls and the floor to confirm that we'd recovered all of the oil that would have seeped into the soil. We've taken approximately 24 samples along 8 transects. Several of those samples have recently come back and shown that there's a little bit more soil to be removed. I would say at this point we'll probably take out another 20 to 40 cubic yards of soil. So we've taken out 5,600. We have a few small pockets that we're going to take a little bit more out of. Once we actually get those confirmation samples back and are certain that we've removed all of the contamination in the upland, we'll move on to restoration efforts there in coordination with the various state and local interests that have jurisdiction over restoration work in the upland. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me, I'm Captain Mark Crossland. It's M-A-R-K. Last name is C-R-O-S-S-L-A-N-D. And I'm with the California State Department of Fish and Wildlife, Office of Spill Prevention and Response. Our agency has an enormous responsibility of managing the state's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources, for which their ecological value and enjoyment by the public is so critically important. We want this region and the entire nation to know that we are committed to meeting these challenges. We are satisfied with the work done so far at this Refugio incident, but there is more to do. The Unified Command is reaching a turning point from short-term to long-term response goals. And within this structure, our scientists will continue with shoreline evaluation and natural resource damage assessment. These crews have been working on the front lines since the incident began, collecting data and charting the extent of injury. They've also been documenting human use impacts of these valued resources. All of the information they gather will be used to create a restoration plan prepared by federal and state trustees who will make a claim for funds from the responsible party to implement restoration progress and projects. The trustee agencies will seek public input, helping guide restoration project ideas to address impacts to different wildlife species, coastal habitats, and losses of recreational uses. At this time, the fisheries closure remains in effect from Cañada de Alegría to Coal Oil Point. The closure boundary includes the shoreline and areas between these 2 points offshore 6 miles. It's the Office of Environmental Health Hazard and Assessment that initiated a sampling program to test fish and shellfish from the closure area. This process requires multiple sets of samples taken over several weeks. Collection, transport to the lab, analysis, and evaluation requires about 2 weeks for each sample. When levels of oil chemicals are below that of potential human health concerns, a recommendation will be made to the Department of Fish and Wildlife that the closure be lifted or that the boundaries be modified. The task of unifying so many different agencies for a common goal is an awesome undertaking, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife would like to thank all of those involved with the Unified Command System. This is a huge effort and could only be done with the cooperation and professionalism of the organizations involved. Many of us from the department call this area home, and I personally patrolled this area working for the department. I've also fished here and I've dove here, and so we have a tremendous empathy for the area community and for the concerns that the people have regarding the oil spill response. And so now I'd like to introduce Senior Environmental Scientist Laird Hank, who will provide an update on the wildlife impacts. Thank you. Laird?
Morning. I'm Laird Hankel, L-A-I-R-D-H-E-N-K-E-L. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm acting as the Wildlife Branch Director for this response. Currently, we are receiving very few reports of oiled wildlife, and we believe we are now back to baseline conditions. We believe that any additional occasional reports of oiled wildlife will likely be associated with natural seeps. As a result, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife together with the UC Davis Oiled Wildlife Care Network and NOAA, will be wrapping up wildlife recovery and stabilization activities for the Refugio incident response. Today will be the last day of wildlife field operations. The Oiled Wildlife Care Network hotline remains active year-round, and any additional reports of injured wildlife will be directed to the appropriate local wildlife rehabilitation organizations. While wildlife operations will be scaled back, care will continue for all recovered wildlife at both SeaWorld San Diego and the Los Angeles Oiled Bird Care and Education Center in San Pedro. So far, 26 cleaned and rehabilitated birds have been released back to the wild, and additional bird and mammal releases will occur when animals are ready. Thanks.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Patrick Hodgins, and I'm the Senior Director of Safety and Security for Plains All-American Pipeline. As the responsible party, we realize the disruption this unfortunate incident has had to the community, to the environment, and to the wildlife. And as we have said over and again, we deeply regret the accidental release of crude oil from Line 901. All of the various agencies up here today that make up Unified Command, along with Plains, and many of the local agencies who have responded, have worked very hard to restore the area, and we believe this collective effort has produced meaningful results so far. While we are pleased with the progress that has been made and the tireless efforts of everyone involved in this response, we will not be satisfied until the job is done. Plains' objective from the very beginning has been very simple: do the right thing and do it quickly. Our focus remains on mitigating the response, but we do understand and recognize the need for costs. And from a cost standpoint, through June 23rd, we estimate that we have spent approximately $92 million on the cleanup and the response effort. This is only an estimate of the spill response and the cleanup costs, and does not include other potential costs, such as third-party claims, fines, penalties, or regulatory court proceedings or lost revenues. I would like to take a moment to supplement some of the comments that have been made regarding the current status of the response in the various work zones. On land, the work continues to be focused on the bluffs and the cliff faces as the cleanup crews have completed the cleaning of the release site to the end of the culvert. The area of oil impacted soils, as you heard earlier, from the release site to the entrance of the culvert has been excavated. We will use a compatible source of backfill material and are awaiting soil sampling results before we restore the excavated areas. The area of the culvert outfall on the beach side of the railroad tracks to the cliff has also been excavated, as you have heard. This is a culturally sensitive area, and we have worked side by side with cultural specialists and archaeologists to ensure the excavation work was done carefully and very respectfully. This work has been completed, and as with the release site, we will restore this area with compatible backfill soil, and we will replant with native plant species. On the waterfront, all visible released oil was collected some time ago. As previously reported, the released oil from line 901 was no longer visible on the water by day 4, but Clean Seas continued to collect natural seep oil after that. This is why recovery vessels have been recently decommissioned from the response effort. On the shoreline, SCAT teams report that 93% of the shoreline has met the cleanup goals for this phase of the recovery. As you know, El Capitan State Beach is reopening on Friday, and work continues at Refugio State Beach to prepare it for reopening in the very near future. These were the only 2 beaches that were closed as a result of this unfortunate release, and their respective reopenings will be a significant milestone in our recovery progress. We continue to clean the tidal areas, rocks, cliff faces on the beaches. This is a more complex type of work, and we are exploring options for cleaning hard-to-access areas. This work will likely require different techniques, different equipment, and different manpower needs. We will continue to have responders focused on impacted areas and conducting more detailed work. During this process, we will be utilizing different types of equipment as well. However, our commitment to this effort is unwavering. I also wanted to note that in addition to the updates provided by Unified Command, since very early in this effort, Plains has been providing routine updates on its activities and overall progress, as well as additional information with respect to questions raised by the public. These information updates were provided on a daily basis for about the first 3 weeks, and then transitioned to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday basis for a few weeks, and are now provided on a weekly basis. This information is available at www.line901response.com. Again, www.line901response.com. For those of you who feel you have been impacted by this unfortunate release, they should call toll-free 866-753-3619. Again, that claims number is 866-753-3619 to file a claim. Finally, please know that all the Plains employees, 350 that work here in California, along with the 5,000 employees from across the United States, remain committed to staying here, actively engaged until the job is done. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tyson, Tyson, Butzke, Butzke. I'm the State Park Superintendent with California State Parks. Just here to comment. We're very happy to be opening El Capitan State Beach this Friday. We are thankful of the efforts of Unified Command and Plains for the cleanup and recovery efforts of our parks. El Capitan State Beach will reopen this Friday, June the 26th. All 132 sites will be open and are already occupied with reservations that were made 7 months ago. The campground check-in time for folks with existing reservations will be 12 o'clock noon. The day use area will be open at 8 in the morning when the park opens. All areas of El Capitan State Beach will be open, including the beach, the water, the campsites, the day use areas, up to the furthest up-coast group camp staircase. That's our shut-off point. Everything down coast of that will be open and available. Everything up coast of that staircase and choke point will be closed for more recovery and cleanup efforts. At this point, there's no definitive date for the reopening of Refugio State Beach. The reservations for that park have been canceled through July the 9th. That is only a window date for us. We're constantly reevaluating for reopening as needed as the cleanup progresses. And one last thing, a tour for the media will be given of El Capitan State Beach tomorrow at 1 p.m. If you're interested in joining or being a part of that tour, contact your points of contact here at the JIC, at the Joint Information Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Unified Command. Now we will begin our 30-minute question and answer period. I do request that we take turns for reporters, so we're going to start off to your right, my left. Please identify who you are, your affiliate, and who the question is being directed to. Like I said, we've only got 30 minutes. It's a very tight window, so if you could help us out, we would appreciate that. So I will open the floor to questions.
So we live around with Channel 11 in LA. Can you talk about, you mentioned the Santa Barbara County area, but down in Los Angeles County has been confirmed blob of oil down at the beaches there. Can you comment on the Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach area and how that's progressing?
The South Bay incident where there was a high number of tar balls that washed ashore close to Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, Torrance Beach. That was a separate incident. It was responded to immediately by the Coast Guard and the state. All of those tar balls associated with that pollution incident were cleaned up. That case is closed. They did sample. The state did produce one of their samples, and I'll let this, I'm not sure, I think actually those questions really should be elevated to Sacramento. because that's a separate investigation. The important thing to know about these events, when we sample, it really doesn't affect how we respond. So really, the samples help connect it perhaps to a responsible party, in which case we know who to bill the charges for, but it does not change the outcome of the response. As you could see in the South Bay incident, it was immediately responded to, immediately cleaned up, and that incident actually, that Unified Command actually demobilized within a week.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, we'll
No,
get
you're
you
good.
now.
I'm Laird Hank, I'm with Newshawk. I just have a question. Is anybody going to break down the timeline, more specific times in the first 24 hours? I think people really would like to know when planes knew, when Clean Seas was activated.
Right. As I mentioned earlier, the investigation is actually a separate process. This Unified Command's focused on response to the investigation. We haven't been focusing on the investigation. The storyboard isn't very specific on times, but that will come out with the investigation. The investigation is being conducted by a separate group of people. The entity that we have here, Santa Barbara, we're all focused on the response and mitigation, not the investigation. So unfortunately, I can't answer your question.
Ms. White, News Press, this is the State Park. What are you looking for when evaluating beaches? What did you find on Okaka Town last week? And what's it going to take for Refugio to open up?
So when it comes to evaluating all the beaches, whether it be the state beaches or the city beaches, that sort of thing, we have a team of individuals. It's called a Shoreline Cleanup Assessment Team, SCAT. They go and evaluate the beaches based on what they're seeing. Do they see tar balls? Do they see free oil? Do they see tar mats? Has it been cleaned up? Has it been cleaned up to a level that we have identified as being acceptable? Because we have a representation on the SCAT team, including Coast Guard, Cal Fish and Wildlife, the county, I believe on the state beaches we have the state there. We have the local entities that are from that particular beach. So if it was Ventura County, we had Ventura County representation on that SCAT, basically determining the level of the cleanliness. There are some cases where you would actually leave some pollution there. For example, if you have a boulder that has mussels on it, you're not going to remove the mussels, because in those cases we feel that it's more harm will be done if you remove the mussels that might have been affected by that pollution. So essentially, we use the same process throughout the whole 90 plus miles that we have identified pollution at. Does that answer your question?
So if I understand the question correctly, you're asking about what type of equipment the SCAT team uses? They'll use a variety of things to deter and test the environment, conditions such as pH, for example, temperature, looking at the variety of exposure, the type of substrate, the given area, whether it's rocky, intertidal, sand, all those factors, if you will contribute to their decision making in terms of how the area should be cleaned up. And then down the road, through our natural resource damage assessment, then determining how, in fact, we can monitor the conditions as well and improve the habitat and hopefully restore it to its natural condition. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up for you.
Okay. Sure.
You spoke a little bit about fishery closure. Can you elaborate on that at all? I mean, have there been 2 rounds of samples tested at this point, or where are we at?
Okay, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking me to elaborate on the process itself. All I can tell you is there's been multiple samples. I don't have an exact number, but multiple samples of both shellfish as well as finfish have been collected throughout the area exposed, and those samples have been sent up to our lab in Rancho Cordova. The actual testing process takes about 10 days. It can't be expedited any faster than that. I've already asked for that to happen, and in fact we've got to wait for the process to run its course. But I'm hopeful in the coming weeks that we'll get those sample results back, and through the Office of Health and Environmental Assessment, we'll determine whether or not it's safe to open it for the public.
Paul Verkaman, CNN. Can you give us a little more precise details on how far south tar balls from this spill were found, and highlight some of the beaches and how you match this?
With regards to the sampling from the South Bay incident, I just respectfully ask that you contact Sacramento, what's the office name? Office of Spill Prevention and Response up in Sacramento. They're handling the sample results that the state took. The Coast Guard as well. You can contact Coast Guard District 11 to talk about those sample results. Unfortunately, the Coast Guard results are associated with the federal investigation, so we have not yet released those results. But again, I just want to stress the results of the samples really don't impact the response that we do here. Regardless of what the sample results say, the response has been done, especially in the South Bay incident here. We didn't even know the results for the Ventura, but we asked the responsible party. We're sending teams down there to clean up the beach, and that's what happened. And that's part of this whole event, the Ventura County.
Somebody address what's being done right now to prevent anything like this from happening again.
So that everybody heard, I believe the question is, what are we doing to make sure this doesn't happen again? Again, the PHMSA is conducting a federal investigation with all parties to determine the cause. Once that cause is made public, we'll be very transparent. Everybody, including ourselves, wants to know the results of that investigation. When we know what the results are, we will take that into account and put plans forward to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Mr. Crossland, I'm Lance Rossland. We're talking about sort of wrapping up with both the mammals and birds about members, specifically numbers of birds that have been treated.
Okay, let me ask Laird to come up, our environmental scientist. I believe he could provide some more information. Thank you.
Sure. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Just looking for some specific numbers on the number of birds and also mammals that have been treated and released and also that died.
So I may not have all the numbers you're interested in. The totals are released each day by the Joint Information Center, and the total number collected so far is 249 birds. That was 57 collected alive, 192 collected dead, 168 mammals have been collected. That was 62 collected alive, 106 collected dead. Birds were primarily brown pelicans. Mammals were primarily California sea lions. I think I mentioned earlier 26 birds have been released. That's the total number of animals released so far. We do anticipate many additional animals being released, but I don't have in front of me the number of animals still alive in care.
Gail O'Schrankel with Pacific Standard. I have a question for Patrick. Will you be reimbursing Veneco and Exxon for their economic losses while the port platforms are shut down? And what do you estimate those costs might be?
Again, as we've said before, if anybody feels they have been impacted as a result of this unfortunate accidental release, we have a claims number. It's 866-753-3619. All those claims are handled confidentially with the individuals. Thank you.
If I have a question on the Ventura situation here. I've been down at Ormond Beach, and I sat in a puddle of oil from an area that I suspect was not cleaned up because of the concerns for the snowy plover. Will someone be going back and monitoring pour oil on those beaches in the fall after the plovers have left, or finished breathing, and will that oil be cleaned up?
In those situations where we're unable to reach certain sections of the beach because of those constraints, whether it be the plover nesting season, we will be taking a look at those areas in the future, yes.
I'm Jessica with GCNS, and I'd like to know, why are the beaches being cleaned when reports continue to be made? And my second question is, when reports are made regarding oil beaches or wildlife, will samples be taken and tested, since the public believes that continued oil and tar on beaches is related to this spill, and we need to assure testing as well as response?
As you know, this area is prone to natural seeps and tarballing. Whenever there's a pollution incident that's, or pollution report that's made to the National Response Center, we will use our normal process to send someone out to evaluate that pollution report, to assess it, and to respond as appropriate. Many times, if we determine it's a natural seep, and maybe it's unrecoverable, and a lot of times you can tell it's natural seep based on the smell of the tar ball, or if there's oiling, fresh oiling, or the weathering that's been done to that tar ball as it reaches the shoreline. You can make a good, educated assessment of if it's something that we need to do, something that we need to address or clean up. So the answer is yes. For every pollution report, we will assess it and respond as appropriate. Does that mean that we're going to clean up every tar ball? Perhaps not. That's not something that we've done in the past. That's something that we're not responsible for cleaning up natural seeps. And as you know, in this area, the Santa Barbara, off the coast of Santa Barbara, there's many known seeps in the area.
Back over to this side.
Mr. Hodgins, can you elaborate at all? You mentioned 92 million. Can you elaborate on that? What's, you said it's an estimate, but can you offer any more insight into what that's covering?
So the question is, how much does that $92 million look like? Again, our focus remains on the response, and that's truly what it needs to be, is to respond to the incident, safety of the responders, the public, and mitigate the incident as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, we'll figure out what the costs are and what it breaks down, but those include things such as the costs of responding to the incident, the equipment, the logistics of that. We keep an idea of what the costs are from the agencies as well, but again, it's just an estimate. Somewhere down the road, we'll figure out what the exact cost is, and we'll be transparent with that as well.
So you'll be more or less? Growing?
We're continuing to be here, so we know we still have 7% of the beaches to complete. We're going to be here to do the right thing and get it done, and so those numbers we expect to continue to grow. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the Unified Command?
Can somebody recall for me or tell me how many times you had opportunities for the volunteers to suit up and go out and clean up the tar, and why they don't seem to be continuing? Because I think there are volunteers who still were expecting to be called and had been trained.
Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, we initially involved over 1,000 people in the volunteer program, and we're instrumental in helping train up some of those people in a modified hazardous waste assessment training regime. So many of those people were utilized in the earlier stages of this event. However, as we progressed and as we improved and cleaned up a number of areas, a lot of those folks weren't needed in that capacity, and so we haven't been using all of those people that we were using initially.
But so how many times did you have them out?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have that number. I can get that number for you later, but I don't know exactly how many times they employed the volunteers on the beach areas.
So did you actually train 1,000 people?
I understood that we trained at least that many people.
But probably used maybe a few hundred or less.
I can't say exactly how many total, but I know that we trained up a lot of people in order to make this event more successful.
And are the CERT people the ones who have been trained before with the more extensive training, are they still doing volunteer work?
Yeah, and through the Oiled Wildlife Care Network, we have an awful lot of people that have been pre-trained and dedicated to the response effort, you know,
Yeah,
from
I know
here.
about them, but what, you have these other people who've been on the beach and watching the other volunteers, and I'm not sure what else certain people have done. Are they still active other than cleaning the wildlife?
They're not as active as they were in the initial stages of this response, but they're still available and will be used in other areas, I'm sure, as this restoration continues. People are wonderful that way, aren't they? I mean, they come out and help in any capacity, and so it's really been a pleasure to work with them and to employ them in a way that's very positive. And you know, that's the bottom line. They've been used, and it's been a very positive effect. So.
Question for Patrick. If and when the
And who are you with?
Santa Barbara Shore newsletter, homeowner newsletter, if and when the pipeline is repaired and starts to be used again, will monitoring be placed on it, and will you allow the county this time to take a look at the x-rays of the wells and things that you resisted through a court case 4 years ago, or will it be kept quiet and out of our hands again?
Once again, we're going to let the investigation continue. It would be inappropriate for me to even discuss the investigation at this point in time. Once PHMSA comes back, it will be transparent with all the information they have.
I'm asking about in the future, will you put better monitoring in place that is state-of-the-art now, so that the millions of dollars you take out of your summer will be spent to protect our coastline so this doesn't happen again? That's what I'm asking.
So once again, we operate the line in connection with the federal PHMSA regulations. And again, as far as restarting the line, we have no plans at this point in time to restart the line until we further know what happened as part of that investigation.
That's pretty good Jason answer. Thank you.
The public first responders who went down to the beach and continued to do public citizen monitoring are sticking with their story that there were no hazmat people actually working until after 24 hours. Was that something, could you respond to that, and also respond to, was it a contract issue that delayed the cleanup, people getting out there?
I don't know where you got those reports, but we did have people on the beach that were properly trained. Not only, I mean, the very first day, the 19th of May, we had people on the beach deploying boom. We had vessels on the water skimming up oil off the water. We had vacuum trucks at the release site that were vacuuming up the crude oil at that release site. The next day, we had people on the beach, and as every day went, we had more and more people on the beach. It's possible that your contacts had looked at a beach where we weren't at. As you mobilize for a big event, you know, you have to get more and more people, and you spread more and more out. Initially, our response really did focus on Refugio Beach and El Capitan and on the water. And as it spread out, and as the effects of the oil were reported in different areas, we responded to those areas as soon as we could.
But just to follow up, what time did the boom get out, and how many boom, and how long did it stay out on the first day?
So that sounds like a timeline question. You want specifics on the timeline? That would be part of the investigation. But I don't have the exact times in front of me. I know it was before sunset because someone showed me a picture of a boat with a helicopter over the boat with boom in the water collecting oil from the water. So I know it's probably hard for the general public to comprehend what it takes to respond to an oil spill, but it is very complicated, especially when you're moving boats on the water. It takes time to transit from one port to the site. To deploy heavy equipment takes time, and you have to take certain safety precautions. To move heavy equipment to the beach, to the staging area, also takes time and effort. But all of those things were being done. And in my opinion, it was done fairly quickly and as in accordance with our area contingency plan. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for the Unified Command?
I read the reports from one of the media that there were 6 samples tested. I think that was speaking only about the samples down at Manhattan Beach or in LA, but can somebody tell us how many samples of the tar balls have been taken and how many labs are involved in testing them, and when we might get more results from all the other beaches?
So during this response event, we've taken a lot of samples. We've taken air samples, we've done air monitoring, we've done water sampling, we've done tar ball sampling, we've done oil from the pipeline, oil from the release site. There's a lot of sampling to be done. I don't have the exact number of samples that were taken, but consistent with many other spill responses that we do, you take samples and many times you split them, or you jointly take them with other agencies. So there are multiple labs that are involved. Obviously, there's a federal lab, there's a state lab. The responsible party can use their own lab. So there are multiple testing points, and it gets complicated with the sampling, and that's why the response team here doesn't really get too involved in the results of the response. Those results really help us do our job effectively to make sure it's safe to be there, or make sure that we're cleaning up the right oil, or make sure the wildlife that's being found is not related to this event, that sort of thing. And these things take time, and I can't even tell you the whole number of sampling that was done out there. I can tell you it's a lot, and it's in every facet, from soil to wildlife to on the beach, on the water, at the pipeline. It's very complicated.
So why are we getting a report only related to Manhattan and not a report on whether, say, the oil on Hollywood Beach or Ormond Beach or Haskell Beach was predominantly, seep oil, or whether it in fact had oil from the spill?
So that's a good question. I can speak to the Coast Guard samples, that they're tied into a federal investigation, and therefore we haven't released the results. We have the results, we haven't released the results to those samples. I believe the state has a similar situation where they have results, and they've released, I think, a sampling of the samples. I'm not sure how many results they've released. But again, I just want to stress it does not affect the response efforts that we've made thus far, whether it be in the South Bay incident with Manhattan Beach. Ventura County was actually part of this event, where when they started washing up in high numbers, we immediately sent contractors down. We responded to that event and cleaned it up. The county of Ventura was involved. They were satisfied with their involvement. They were satisfied with our response efforts. It was something important to us to make sure that something out of the ordinary like that, we sent people to it right away.
And is somebody now testing on the bottom of the ocean in the channel?
There was underwater sampling. We actually had divers out at one point to dive on certain sites, especially where most of the impacted oil went initially at Refugio and El Capitan. Those dive surveys that we conducted did not produce any evidence of subsurface oil. That's not to say that there is no subsurface oil, but the dive survey that we conducted over the course of several days didn't indicate that. I'm sure there'll be continued sampling as the months or the year goes on. It's part of the normal process, and that we would do to monitor the environment and make sure that no irreparable harm has been done.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Can you say at all where the oily water and the tar that was collected, how do you determine what portion of it is natural seepage, what is going into the spill, where is it taken, are there tests done to it, what happens to it?
So on the water, trying to determine if it was related to the actual event or natural seepage has been something very interesting in this response effort, obviously. But when we have boats out on the water, they actually have helicopters overhead navigating them towards the spill sites to help them collect certain areas. We believe, and actually it's pretty noticeable where the natural seeps are. They're actually documented, the locations. You can see it bubbling up. And after the first couple of days, and I can't remember which day it was, we started collecting seep oil on the water. We collected that as a matter of precaution because the seep oil was going to a beach that we had not yet cleaned up from the original, the initial pollution event from the pipeline, and we needed to get that to a point, cleaned up to a point where we felt satisfied, but the beach kept on getting re-oiled by seep. We knew it was seep because you could see the seep, you could see the trail of seep from the the point of where it normally releases to the beach, and you can see that by the helicopter. So we were kind of in a little conundrum in the beginning because we could never catch up to this, to clean up the beach in time before the seep hit it again. So we had to work extra hard. With the boats that were on the water were collecting seep oil for a matter of days until we could actually get that beach cleaned up. It's very complicated. Does that answer your question? So the vessels would collect the oily water substance in the water. They would actually have to take that, and it gets, I'm forgetting the word. They would take it somewhere else to be processed, essentially, and evaluated to categorize how much oil was collected, how much water was collected. It's the word of, like... That was... No, and I for some reason I can't remember the word, but it's basically they would have to now analyze it after the fact, decipher how much water was collected, how much oil was collected, and basically, like when you get rid of the dispose. That's the word I'm thinking of. It's a hazardous material. You just can't throw it away. There's certain processes that you need to do to dispose of the oil water. Same is true of the soil. Obviously, they would probably separate the oil from the soil, and it's my understanding that they use some of that for recycling, for asphalt and other means like that. So they try to recycle the oil in that manner. All of that information, though, is important because eventually we need to know how much oil was actually collected, and so we can get to what was the actual amount that was spilled. That's something that you can't come out with a calculation overnight, because it takes time to pull that oil out of the soil to figure that out. It takes time to figure out what was actually on the water, and then we have the complicated factor of we were collecting seep oil, so you can't factor that into the original spilled oil figure. So it's very complicated. It could take months, if not years, to figure this out.
Can I ask one follow-up question on human health issues? Could you speak to reports of chemical pneumonia coming in by anyone in the public?
So, unfortunately, we've reached our time limit, but if there are any follow-up questions that you have, please address them to me and I will get back to you with those answers. So, again, appreciate you coming out. Unified Command, thank you very much. I know you've got to get back to the response, so please let me know if you have any questions. I'll remain at the podium to take those down and then provide any other insights that you may need. So thank you again for coming out, and this press conference is closed.